From a military strategic point of view, what we've done has just been so stupid with this Ukraine war because not only have we expended a huge portion of NATO munitions and stockpiles, but we have been piecemealing them bit by bit to the Ukrainians, and we've seen Russia learn to how to counter every single weapon we have. Right. Maybe if we went out an all-out blitz and used all of our real super fancy weapons right in the beginning, then you don't have any time to adapt and you knock out all of the Russian command centers or whatever it is, and then boom, playing victory. But here it's like, all right, here's the HIMARS. It will give you 20 rockets. You send some samples into Russia, and Russia can spend some time.
Great.
Thanks for sending these in. We'll take a look at how to dismantle this piece of equipment, the best way to destroy it, the best way to neutralize it through electronic warfare. And we've done that with every single weapon. And now it's like, what do we have left? It's like, now we're going to give them the next one, JSAM. All right, it takes the Russians 2 weeks now when a new weapon is used for them to effectively neutralize it. Right. And I think they're getting...
So it made them a lot stronger. And then you know that they're...
And made ourselves so much weaker. That's the thing I think people don't realize.
And you know the Russians are passing the information on to the Chinese. So, I mean, though they're not making ATACMS are really an important part of the U.S. arsenal. And that was one reason they were reluctant to give them to the Ukraine is they wanted to conserve them for possible use in the China region, in the South China Sea. But now, they have fewer of them, and you know that the Chinese know how to neutralize them too. I mean, this is a huge blow to the U.S. military. This is, essentially, you've strengthened, you kind of it's almost like you couldn't design a better way of strengthening the Russian army. It's just, introducing a weapon at a time, giving them a few weeks to figure it out. And then you go on to the next weapon, they figure that one out, they neutralize that.
Right. And just the rise of just nationalism within Russia, because they're so clearly wronged here that the recruitment numbers for the Russian military have been going up consistently every month. Every single time NATO and the U.S. does something else, more provocations, then it just causes more and more Russian young men to stand up and be like, no, I'm going to defend Mother Russia. And they're
the whole idea that you would destabilize Russia and that you would strengthen like anti-Putin forces. The only anti-Putin forces that you're strengthening are the ones that are to the nationalist side of him, to the not even necessarily the nationalist right. There's the nationalist left to the Communist Party. There is sometimes a frustration in general. Russian society and the Russian government is clearly solidly behind him. But if there's any frustration, it's not with the fact that he's prosecuting this war, but that he's doing it so cautiously. That's the only thing. The only hand you're strengthening that leftist or Western leaning faction within the Russian government and politics, thanks to all these measures that the sanctions and all the Russophobia that you see in the West, that is almost gone. It used to be a real force. I mean, it didn't count for much in numbers, but they, a lot of those people were wealthy. There were, some of the so-called oligarchs were very strongly Western leaning, and then there were groups within the government that were very pro-Western, and they're just almost gone. And it was thanks to the efforts of the West. I mean, everything they did was to strengthen nationalism in Russia and strengthen their army
and their economy.
Even their economy, incredibly. I think even to the amazement of the Russians themselves.
Right. Yeah, I just can't think of a worse debacle in military history, military strategy in the history of the world. I mean, everything from start to finish or to present now, it's just...
Right. Again, you wouldn't know it if you were just reading, following the mainstream media. The reports are coming out about how grim it is on the front lines for the Ukraine, even in very pro-Ukraine Western mainstream media like The Economist and CNN. We are getting these reports. But a lot of people who don't read The Economist or they and just look at their, Google News feed or whatever appears on Facebook, they're still thinking that the Ukrainians are doing incredible things in Kursk. And obviously, at some point, that whole narrative is going to collapse. But it still exists amazingly, in spite of all the reality. The reality is seeping in at the higher levels, again, the intelligence agencies and the defense departments and some of the, the more intelligent media. It's starting to seep in. Actually, they're saying things that we on the, people in the dissident media have been saying for 2 years, and now they're finally starting to admit them, within the mainstream media. Not fully, but they're starting to admit them. But again, for the average Joe consumer of news, he has no awareness of this. Well, it's got to hit him in the face at some point. There's some point where you can't. The narrative just won't be supportable any longer. Maybe it's when, like, after Pokrovsk, right, collapses and they start marching towards the Dnieper or something like that. There will be some point where you just can't hide it anymore.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, just for personal vindication, because there's just so many people out there that are just constantly going on how Russia's on its last leg. They've expended 90% of their military. They're about to collapse. It's insane. It's crazy how, and I'm like, whoa, where are you? Where are you getting your sources from?
Yeah.
I'm in a different world. And they always say history is written by the victors. So yeah, Russia is going to be victorious here. They will get to write the history. But I wonder how long it takes for that to really...
Yeah, I think that, obviously when, Russia is going to win this war, is winning this war and will win it. Again, it may not be a pretty victory, like Mearsheimer says. I think it could be a very ugly victory, but clearly they're going to win it. But when that happens, there will be the spin machines will go on. If they say, well, okay, yeah, too bad, half of Ukraine is gone or whatever. But the Russians wanted to take all of Ukraine. So basically it's a victory for Ukraine. Of course, the Russians never said that they wanted to take all of Ukraine. And in fact, if you looked at what the agreement that they had made with the Zelensky government at the very beginning of the conflict, they were willing to give them everything, even the Donbass. Right, if he agreed to neutrality and respect the rights of Russian ethnic Russians there, they only were going to insist on holding on to Crimea. Now that's all gone. But the spin machine will go and they'll say somehow. I don't think people will find it all that convincing, because they're going to remember it's like, this is not what we were being promised. And Zelensky we're always talking about marching to Crimea. But they'll try, and they might even succeed with some people who have very short memories.
But it'll succeed with a lot of people, more than you think.
Yeah,
that's the problem. That's the problem. Is
a lot of people just live in the moment and they just even forget what they were told 6 months ago.
Or there's an absolute refusal to admit that they were wrong or to change their mind. They can't bring themselves to do it. I mean, you see it on so many different things, and just the hypocrisy. I mean, just like COVID, I think is a great example. How everybody just that now that where we are now, we should be able to look back on that whole COVID experience and be like, okay, we made some real mistakes here on some of these lockdowns, on enforcing these boosters, not doing the right studies. There's obviously interests were corrupted, but a huge amount of the population just will never admit that there was anything really wrong about it and continue to just to stay in that path. And they may be like that forever. So I think with something like the Ukraine war, with the spin machine, it's easy to hold on to your narrative, what you want to believe, and I think it will be difficult.
Yeah, but the thing is, it won't work for most of the world. Just like it's already not working. That most of the world will see how the Russians beat NATO, and maybe within NATO countries they can convince themselves, the segment of the population, that this didn't happen, but the rest of the world's going to look at it and say, "Wow, the Russians defeated NATO."
And it's such a in such a sure way. They didn't even have to go that hard. I feel like it.
There was never a total mobilization. And, that was, again, a criticism from a lot of people within Russia. Felt like Ukraine should have, that Putin should have gone to the Russian people and said, look, to win this war, we need to totally mobilize. We're going to have to tighten our belts. And, there's going to be some economic hardship, but we just got to do this. He actually never did that and has managed to really insulate the Russian economy from the war. And the vast majority of Russian people, again, your sisters in Moscow, and she has Russian coworkers and Russian friends, and like nobody knows anybody that's been, first of all, conscripted. The mobilization was, it was in the fall of 2022, and it was only 300,000 people. It was from reservists. So nobody even knows anybody that was mobilized at that time. They don't even know anybody that knows anybody that's signed up in Moscow. Um, it's like the only story that she's heard about. Okay, somebody who knew somebody that did sign up. This was a co-workers from the Tula region, which is, I believe, where people are kind of ethnically similar to the Mongols, and Buddhism is their religion by and large there. And they're very, very patriotic, very strong supporters of Putin and the Russian government. And she said, like, she knew a bunch of like high school, these young men who were really excited about joining the Russian army. So as soon as they graduated and they were of legal age to sign up, they just went there as a group and they all signed up. He said, send us to the front. And like 2 weeks later, they got kicked out because apparently they had some wild party in the barracks, and the Russians just said, "You guys are clearly not ready for this," and just sent them home. So anyway, it shows, if anything, this is not an army that's just desperate for soldiers.
Well, and you juxtapose it to what's happening in Ukraine, and it's just horrific. These people that are just being pulled off the streets. Yeah, no, you can't write a more humiliating debacle and defeat for NATO. And like, let's be honest, this is NATO. We say like, if all of NATO is in, NATO has given a ton, of everything. And not only have we allowed them to piecemeal the use of the weapons that they can neutralize it, we look at what's happened to Russia. The Russian economy is stronger than ever. It has a greater position in the world. It is now has, I think, another 37 countries have signed up to join BRICS Plus. It is leading the new multipolar world. And its army is stronger than ever. Like you're saying, we're getting more and more people signing up for the Russian military every single month. Since this thing has started, it's just getting bigger and stronger and more capable. And it's just like, what were we thinking? What was NATO doing? What were we thinking?
It's a huge intelligence failure. There's just no question about it. I mean, this is really you would hope that heads would roll and there would be a reassessment. Unfortunately, it just seems like, again, a lot of our institutions have been corrupted, and these people just who maintain power, they maintain power by just saying what the leaders want to hear. And as long as that's the way things work, there's just not going to be any improvement. We're going to have future intelligence failures.
Right. I mean, Russia is going to single-handedly defeat all of NATO without breaking a sweat, effectively.
Yeah. Well, I would say they broke a sweat. I mean, there's, clearly tens of thousands of Russian soldiers have been killed. We don't really know what it could be over 100,000. We don't know. So it's serious.
For sure. But I mean, just in the grand scheme of things, though, I mean, just, like you're saying, Peggy, our sisters in Moscow.
Yeah, the vast majority of Russians don't, they don't feel it. Right. They're not feeling the effects of the war. Nobody's, when we were there, the only thing, you saw the occasional billboard, but that was it. I mean, it's not a militarized society. People are going about their business, and there's business is humming.
And Europe is collapsing, it's, and the U.S.
Yeah, Germany is deindustrializing, right?
It's crazy. It really is such an insane thing. It'll be interesting telling my boys about this period in history. The dumbest leadership, dumbest military strategist in the history of the world. Yeah. Like, I feel like if you just played video games, you would know better than this.
If you put the average gamer in charge, would have come out with a better outcome than this. Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's a proof, again, I think, of some very corrupt institutions. Intelligence, political. It's just that these kind of decisions this bad aren't made, by clear-eyed who are engaging in sound analysis. Obviously there was just the analysis had been politicized. we'd heard warnings
Right.
about that from like XCI guys for years and years. It's clearly true. I mean, it's these agencies have been politicized and therefore corrupted.
Okay, well, I think we can end it there. I mean,
Yeah,
just the last thing I'll say is, though, we're not out of the woods yet. That the U.S. still has nukes. We could see what happens when the things really start to collapse. Things are looking like there's no way for Ukraine to win this thing, and this is where maybe a stupid, stupid decision gets made. So let's hope that doesn't
yeah.
happen.
No, that's right. Again, you can see the desperation. That's why we had that trip by Lammy and Tony Blinken. It may be that was the last gasp, but it may be that we're going to see even stronger effort on the part of the neocons. To expand, to escalate to increasingly dangerous levels. We'll see. I think we probably will see efforts. I think there's no question. I just hope that they fail.